and I'm hitting record. So you all will have a copy of this that you could share with your friends and family. And let's see, we've got Pat there. Okay. Hey, ladies.
Hi, everybody.
Unmute, Eileen. Okay. Okay. There you go. Okay. All right. Where are we off to this month?
We're going south to Argentina and to Chile and down into Patagonia. And you'll find out more about what Patagonia is if you haven't been there before. Eileen, before Eileen tells you where she's going to take you, let me take a moment to thank Steve, the man behind the curtain. And we love working with you. Thank you so much for all your expertise. And we've gotten a little assistance from Mike Mulroney. So thank you to Mike as well. And we have two awesome supporters, the Mather, which is a wonderful place, beautiful place to live in between your trips, that's being created at Tyson's Corner, Virginia. And also we want to thank Cruise Planners American Express, our agent Anoop Mitra, who always has a special deal, especially one right now to Antarctica, with an incredible price with a new and private jet flight down there to Ushuaia. So that said, Eileen?
All right. Well, as Pat said, today we're going south of the border, way south. So put on your gaucho hat as we visit Argentina and Chile. I'm going to take you across Argentina, and I'm going to share my screen here. And you can see Argentina, and the sliver of dark green on the left is the nation of Chile. So did you know that Argentina is the 8th largest country in the world, and over 60% of its population have Italian heritage? Its cultural icons, you may recall, are the gaucho cowboy, the tango, malbec, the Iguazu Falls, and the alpine beauty of Patagonia. They've all helped make Argentina the most visited country in South America. Our flight route was Baltimore to Atlanta to Buenos Aires. The last leg took about 10 hours long. It was early morning when we arrived, and our guide was there to meet us and drive us to an estancia, our idea of a lovely idle environment in which to decompress after a long journey. About 40 minutes from the airport, we turned into a magnificent estate named Puesto Viejo. And I am having trouble with my screen at this point. Let's see.
Eileen, click your mouse in the presentation. You might be in the share screen still. Click your mouse in the presentation, see if you can advance.
Okay, I'm going to hit see all screen, all sides.
I don't know about that one, but
yeah, just click the map, see if that does anything.
Click the mouse on the map and then try to advance.
Right, I've got a box open there that's not.
There. Now just click it. Just click there.
There we go. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is Puesto Viejo. Isn't that beautiful? When we passed through the gated kiosk, we drove along this lovely tree-lined avenue. Fields with Black Angus cows lay on one side, and on the other was this clean-shaven expanse of green lawns that boasted polo fields. About a mile down, we arrived at the reception lodge, a one-story hacienda of rust-colored stucco with a wide brick patio shaded by wooden beams. Outside was an alfresco dining area, which was now being set with white teacups and tented platters of tea cakes. This estancia covers over 400 acres, but has the virtue of being both beautiful and close to Buenos Aires. The lawns surrounding the main lodge and the dozen casitas are park-like and filled with November spring blooms. Bushes of tiny yellow asters, orange trees dripping with fruit, tiny kumquats and giant jacarandas. They abounded, and the avian chatter was loud. These brown and white falcons were sharing the trees and the fence posts with full-throated songbirds. Nearby was a pool house with a square of dark blue water tumbling off the edges. This estancia draws different crowds and operates as a hotel, a restaurant, a premier polo site, a farm, and most recently, a glamorous campground promoting a new travel feature known as glamping. This last we learned about over afternoon tea, where with this blind luck, we found ourselves in the company with the owner, Jeremy, a Brit, several of his British friends, and an Argentine man from Manhattan who runs the Americas operations for Estee Lauder. When the conversation turned to glamping, we asked if we could observe the evening entertainments planned at the campsite. And the owner graciously agreed. And so towards evening, we were driven to the site. It was about 2 miles distant. 25 tents, the size of small houses, lined the perimeter. Camp chairs circled the edges of a huge bonfire, its flames shooting into the night sky. The night was cold, and I was glad to have brought along hat and gloves. There were waiters on hand to pass around wine. However, conversation with our neighbors was hampered by the fact that they were all French-speaking. And then the show began. A small raised platform welcomed 2 costumed dancers, he wearing a poncho and gaucho hat, and she was in a wide-skirted Victorian dress. The musician accompanied the dancers with song and guitar strummings. And when the folklore show concluded, we were invited into this stunning tent enclosure, red and white colored swags at the entrance. A long table was set for 30 and festooned with lanterns. I struggled to recycle my high school French in order to make a few basic inquiries. They had toured about 8 regions in their 2-week sojourn and would be departing the next day. I thought they had enjoyed a remarkable last evening in Argentina. The next morning, we took breakfast in the estancia's airy dining room. We struck up conversation with our new friend Celio, a Frenchman with a Brazilian name who works in London and plays polo here. He invited us to watch him in the big polo match that day, but unfortunately we weren't not going to be on property that long. So we asked him to tell us about the game. He told us that until recently, polo horses had a height limit. The Argentine horses are called criollos, and they're short and wide-chested. But now other countries have ignored the height limit. Many racehorses, once they have aged out of that sport, are being retrained for polo, a process that takes several years. Their inclusion in the game has made polo a much faster game. The horses peak around 10 years and can continue to play another 5 to 10 years. The players typically begin the sport in their 30s or 40s, it being an expensive sport. In the game, riders switch horses out every several minutes, usually playing a round of 6 horses. Later, we took a half-hour carriage ride around the complex, during which time we passed several barns full of horses, well over 100. We asked what were the chief polo areas in the United States, and Celio told us they're Florida, Connecticut, and Texas. It was quite the tutorial on polo. Well, we capped off our 24-hour stay at the estancia, there are the horses, with this lunch set out in this beautiful arbor. That's my husband, Marshall, waiting for his food. Our companions that day included a British lady banker, Mr. Estee Lauder, and a handsome polo star. When asked his favorite country to play in, he replied, "Oh, the one that pays the most." So our guide showed up and we were driven into Buenos Aires, where we took up lodging for the next few days in the Recoleta section of the city. That's an area that looks quite Parisian with lots of trees and little shops. It was fun. It was Sunday, so we thought to attend Mass in Pope Francis's former church. We directed the cabbie to take us to the cathedral. Well, he did, but it was the wrong cathedral. This one was the cathedral at Plaza del Mayo. Who knew the city would have two cathedrals? Well, after Mass, we wandered the famous Sunday straw market in San Telmo, which stretches for at least a mile. And then we had to find our way over to the Museo de Belles Arts because the museums are all closed on Mondays. Here we saw a large Turner exhibit fresh from the Tate, and then wandered into the Argentine artist section, which, oh, I'm sorry, there is the Cathedral de Mayo. Here is the a sample of the Argentine artwork. We didn't find it compared in ideas or colors to the European and North American artists we had seen there. In the evening, we attended an event called the Argentine Experience. This was an English language dinner with culinary games such as guessing the ingredients in the welcome drink or a contest for the best designed empanada. We learned that they come in different shapes to indicate whether it's a meat or cheese or some other stuffing. And we also tasted a bitter mate drink, and Jane has brought along her mate cup. Can we see that on screen right now? No, okay. We'll come back to when Jane is on, she's gonna show you her mate cup. The drink is bitter, according to American taste. It's beloved by the Argentines and communally shared. Much more to our liking were the alfafors, these wonderful cookies that are filled with this caramel-based dulce de leche, then rolled in coconut, and then dipped in chocolate. Oh my God, it was fabulous. So on our second day, we had a city tour. The Boca district was home to many immigrants and is known for its colorful houses built out of sheet metal, and also for its soccer team. Their team colors, blue and gold, came from a decision to adopt the colors of the ship of the first nation to pull into port. And wags like to say it was perhaps the only Swedish ship ever to dock there. The soccer fans here are fanatical, and the government has had to ban visitors from the visiting teams because they're worried about their safety. So the next stop was the Plaza May 25 that houses the famous Posada Rosa, the pink presidential building which maintained his offices, but not his residence. And next to it is the Metropolitan Cathedral, former home to the Pope, and the one we had meant to see. Lots of statues fill the plaza. There's even one of Pinocchio. In something now familiar, the plaza is roped off so that protests can only take place some distance from the presidential offices. So I learned that at the turn of the century, Argentina had the 7th largest economy in the world. Its citizens set out to express their status through beautiful architecture, such as this. And the city was filled with buildings aping European styles like Beaux-Arts and Art Deco. We then moved on to the Old Port, which is Port Madero. It's famous for its restaurants and nightclubs. It was the city's port for only 25 years, after which the country's economic boom demanded larger ships and a larger port. Our bus ride paused as we approached a dramatic piece of footbridge architecture, the Puente de la Mujer, the Woman's Bridge. The Puente de la Mujer gets its name from the fact that most streets in the district here are named after prominent Argentine women, although because of some ruling, Evita Peron is not among them. The bridge is unique because its mast swings 90 degrees to allow water traffic to pass, but it is the design that has given this bridge its fame. It resembles a movement in a tango dance. The 128-foot arm is said to resemble the man when a couple is in mid-tango. Another impressive sculpture we passed was titled Floralis Generica, shaped as a giant metal flower. The sculpture was also designed to move, closing its petals at night and reopening each morning. Next stop was the Cementerio in Recoleta. It is a mile square full of individually styled mausoleums, which our guide pronounced mausoleums. A few years ago, a plot sold for $800,000, causing us to note that there are ritzy neighborhoods even in death. Its most famous resident, of course, is Eva Perón. The story goes that she lay in state for 2 years, and her body had been held by the government awaiting a monument to be built in her honor. But then an election ousted Perón and his party, and the Peronistas stole the body. For a time, it resided in a colonel's home. One night, he thought he heard an intruder enter the house. He grabbed his pistol and shot away, killing his pregnant wife. Well, then the body completely disappeared for years, and it was finally rediscovered in a plot in Italy. So Perón and his new wife flew to Europe to claim the body. You can't make this stuff up, you know. The entourage of 3 arrived back in Argentina, but were thwarted by Eva's relatives, who went to court and gained custody of the body. She lies buried in the Duarte family mausoleum. That afternoon, we toured the Teatro Colón, the largest hall in South America. It seats 3,000. Native artists such as Marta Argerich and conductor Daniel Barenboim would have known the Teatro Colón. This is its lobby. Pavarotti is said to have complained that the acoustics there were so good the audience could hear every mistake. The long hallways front each of the theater's tiers. We tucked into the presidential suite, which seats 24. Other boxes there housed 4 to 6 people. The 6th gallery was where the immigrants sat, demonstrating their Italian heritage and throwing eggs when displeased with the singing. The 5th gallery was the domain of the prostitutes, said to do a lively business during intermissions. In late afternoon, we visited the world's most beautiful bookstore, a 3-gilded affair where books now replace the space once occupied by audiences. Isn't that stunning? And then in the evening, we attended a tango show, one of Argentina's cultural treasures. Tango began in the 1880s as a partner dance in the brothels and bars of ports along the border of Argentina and Uruguay. It combined aspects of Spanish, Cuban, and African dance. In its golden age, during the 1930s to 1950s, it became an international showpiece accompanied by leading jazz and swing orchestras. Well, the dancing and the costumes on stage that evening recreated that sultry mood for which the tango is famous. So that concluded our visit to Buenos Aires. We boarded a plane the next day and flew to Mendoza, situated in northwest Argentina. Mendoza is the heart of Argentina's wine country. It's situated actually close to Santiago, Chile, unless one considers the impediments of the Andes. The drive time is close to 7 hours. Our lodging was Club Tapiz, a beautiful hacienda and winery in the countryside. You can see the house cat on the stairs there. Another view with the plush sofas. This is all outside. On our first day, we had a morning wine tour to Benegas Lynch, one of the famous old wineries and just down the street. They have a castle-sized great hall, at least 2 stories high. And in the middle, you can see the world's largest cooker on the right. Here again, we encountered multiculturalism, thinking back to Celio, the Brazilian, French, London polo playing person. Our guide was a former lawyer of Greek heritage from Brazil. Downstairs in the winery, we wandered into a festival of ponchos, the owner's personal collection. We tasted 4 wines in a prettily set cava, but left with our wallets intact. It was then on to Vistalba, a larger operation that had a very nice malbec. We spent then a lazy afternoon under our portico, admiring the bougainvillea, listening to the birds chirping intramurals, and visited occasionally by the house cat. We made a brief pass through a filigreed wrought iron gate to the adjacent wine building. And in the evening, we adjourned to the back lawn by the pool to enjoy a complimentary wine tasting with fellow lodgers. The dining room was in a lovely Spanish style and with a fabulous kitchen. Oh, Marshall had lamb, I had vegetable cannelloni, and of course wine. The best was the dulce de leche soufflé with ice cream. Oh, that was good. On our second day, we were confronted with another 9 a.m. wine tour. I mean, who drinks wine at that hour? Well, along the way, we were meeting plenty of Brazilians in the wineries. Not only is Mendoza close and wine-oriented, it seems that Brazil has a juvenile wine industry, and there is a 90% tax on imported wine. They are, however, allowed to carry home up to 16 liters each, and so family vacations abound. That afternoon, we hired a car and driver to take us into town. We began with lunch at a wonderful restaurant called, oh, we're going to the wineries. There we are, wonderful restaurant called Azafran. Here we learned that restaurants don't serve salt except by request. It's the government's way of addressing the consequences of poor eating habits. We then acquired a second guide, Nicholas, a commercial pilot and grandson of an admiral who early on supported Pinochet. Nicholas took guide jobs to keep practicing his English, and he took us to the city's Foundation Area Museum. This museum shows the utter devastation of the 1861 earthquake that leveled Mendoza, Argentina's 4th largest city. Here too were stories of the huge Italian and Spanish immigrations of the 20th century. The Plaza Independencia is Mendoza's main square, with satellite squares named España, Italia, Chile, and San Martin. They were created to be a safe retreat for residents to gather in the event of another destructive earthquake. On weekends these days, the plazas come alive with artisan markets, food vendors, lip-locked lovers, and families. It's the rule in Argentina that each main city street bears the name of San Martin or Liberator. And oddly, San Martin disagreed with the policies put in place after he overthrew Spanish rule, and he moved to France. Well, when his body was returned, only 7 survivors of the revolution remained, and they received his casket. And now, at each state ceremony, 7 soldiers stand guard. In the park, especially imposing is the Cerro de Gloria, an allegory in stone memorializing the quest for freedom by San Martin and his army of the Andes. Nicholas said that the government protects that freedom today. Voting in Argentina is mandatory. Tributes to San Martin continued as we drove through the large park named in his honor. This village of a park houses a university, several sports fields, military quarters, a lake, restaurants, and this 4 continents monument. From Mendoza, we were flying to our 3rd visit, and we are heading into Patagonia, We had a 2.5-hour flight into Bariloche's small airport, claimed our Hertz manual shift car, and from there it was a 40-minute drive to our lodging. It was a pleasant drive with the Andes in the distance, except for the huge, huge speed bumps that were strung out across the miles there. Swiss-style buildings and lots of B&Bs dotted the landscape. Ours was called La Posada Juncos, sporting a steep dirt drive and a piece of history. Proprietor Lucas, a hotelier from Buenos Aires, shared some of the house's pedigreed history. It was apparently used as a conference spot for a United Nations meeting. Feeling energized the next day, we drove the long 7 Lakes tour. That meant 7 hours of beautiful scenery. After 3.5 hours, we arrived at the halfway point, San Martin de los Andes, where we had a lovely lunch. The drive was occasionally punctuated by cows or horses on the road. When we returned into Bariloche, we gratefully found a restaurant, a Western-style kava pub with huge hamburgers, the size of small pizzas. We shared one and could barely finish. The next day, we drove the short circuit, easily managed in less than 2 hours. More beautiful lakes and forests to behold. We stopped for hot chocolate at the show-stopping hotel Xiao Xiao. It's spelled L-L-A-O, but it's pronounced Xiao Xiao. This is one of the 2 beautiful log-framed lobbies in this stunning upscale resort. Later then, we drove into Bariloche for lunch. There's Bariloche. Its streets, as you can see, are steeply piled upon a hill. I call it commerce sliding down toward the lake. We bought lots of chocolates at Loreno, then tucked in out of the rain for lunch. And by this point in our vacation, we were a tad weary, so we spent the rest of the day reading and relaxing at the lodge. Our last day came with some challenges. Our plan was to get an early start for the airport, but we had trouble getting gas. Lines 2 blocks long occupied one of 2 lanes of traffic in town, and there were no gas stations at the far end. We had to go back into Bariloche, where we were lucky to find a gas station with high prices by Argentine standards, but fine for our dollar-based budget. At the airport, we then discovered that the pilots were on strike. So surprises can always be part of an adventure. That was our wonderful visit to Argentina. And I am going to turn this over now to Pat to introduce our next portion.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Eileen. That was great. And as we're making a transition here, I wonder if Steve, are you there? Would you like to poll our attendees? They're putting in some wonderful chat, and I can't wait to talk with you all when we finish our presentation, because I'm getting lots of good comments. All right.
Okay, so the first poll question says, guess which Spanish or Portuguese speaking country has had the most visitors from our travel party audience today? So lock in your guess. I'm gonna give it a little bit longer here. Just want to get a few more answers. Okay, all right, we got about 60%, so hold on. This poll is not over yet, so I am going to end that and then hold on just a minute. And then we got a follow-up question to this. All right. And now we're going to ask you another question. And that is, let's find out the answer. Which countries have you visited in South? Okay. So just select one. There's select one of the countries that you visited in South America. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to select more than one. I'm going to let that roll. And hats off to Pat and Eileen, because this is a really clever way to do some polling, and I've never seen anybody do it before like this. Okay, so we're going to end the polling, and I'm going to share the results. And the good news is everybody guessed right. They guessed Argentina was the place that most people have been, and it is. But as you can see here, these are the different places that we've traveled as an audience. Pretty cool.
Pretty great. Thank you, Steve. Well, we're going to be bringing on, before we cross over the Andes, a special friend, a special guest today. Her name is Jane Schlansker, and she has a PR firm in Fort Worth. And her company, Interstar Marketing and Public Relations, has done a lot of consulting over transportation and tourism, especially in Latin America, including Latin America. So with her involvement with the Argentine Chamber of Commerce, she's had a chance to travel extensively in Argentina, as has Eileen. And she has, in the early 2000s, I don't know if you remember, but there was a devastating peso devaluation in Argentina. Mm-hmm. And so she had the opportunity to create and manage a major 2-year project designed to introduce US audiences to this beautiful country and promote tourism to Argentina. So Jane, welcome, welcome. And we are going to, let's see here. I'm trying everything. Oh, let's click on the screen.
Oh,
she is going to take us to a place Eileen has been and I have not. So I want to see Jane's story about Iguazu.
Thank you, Pat, and hello to everyone from Texas. If you've been to Argentina and you want to go back and you want to make a side trip, or if you're going for the first time and you have a little extra time, Iguazu Falls is just a fabulous place to go. There's several great side trips, and I know we haven't had time to mention them, but Tierra del Fuego at the very end of the world. Ushuaia is a wonderful, fun city. Chubut on the below Buenos Aires, down the coast, you can watch whales. The glacier region in the northwest is fantastic. One of my trips went to Tucumán, the smallest province in the northwest. They call it the garden basket of Argentina. They produce 1/3 of the world's lemons there. But I think one of the easiest places to go to is Iguazu. It's less than 2 hours, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's so interesting. And you can really see quite a lot in a day and a half in Iguazu. There's easy access from the regional airport, Jorge Newbery Airport, and you can see the falls. You can take a little, I think there's a package tour where you can go into the jungle. You can go across the walkway and right to the falls. And also see a lot of birds and animals. The area is very lush and tropical. There are over 500 varieties of butterflies and over 400 species of birds. So you're likely to see animals and birds everywhere. The Sheraton Hotel is actually right near the falls, and it's the only hotel located in the national park. but there are many good hotels now. Few at the time that I went the first time, but the Iguazu Grand Hotel has a casino, which is interesting. And there are other attractions in the area that I think you would be interested in. A quick trip to the a little village of the indigenous Guarani Indians, or the Jesuit missions, or into the jungle, as I mentioned, on an eco tour. But as you can see in this picture, we drove right into the falls, and you can get very wet, but it's just an exhilarating experience. These are some of the media people that we took on our tour. You will, if it's a sunny day, you'll see rainbows everywhere. It's a beautiful experience, and I hope you'll consider it if you go again. By the way, Eileen mentioned mate, and you will see people sharing mate everywhere in Argentina. I happen to have a couple of mate cups, and this is what they look like. When we visited the glaciers, the ship's captain going into the area was sipping mate all the way there and back. So thank you for including Iguazu in your travel tour today, Pat and Eileen.
Thank you for sharing one of your many experiences with us today, Jane. We really appreciate it. We're going to take off now out of Buenos Aires, and we're going to get up in the air. We're going to fly over these snowy Andes, the longest mountain range in the world. The Andes are the home to Bariloche. Eileen mentioned she took you to Bariloche during the summer, but in the winter, it's an enormous ski area. And then there are two over in Chile, Portillo and Valle Nevado. Portillo is near Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere at 23,000 feet. Wouldn't you like to ski down from the top of that? I'm going to take you right into Santiago. Santiago is a cosmopolitan city full of beautiful colonial homes. One of them houses one of my favorite things to do in Santiago is go to the Museum of Pre-Columbian Art. And the art there, for me to be excited about it, because look, we live in the center of Smithsonian museums, is pretty outstanding. I love this museum. But in Santiago, when I go to Chile, I get excited remembering the poetry of these two Nobel Prize winners in literature, Gabriela Mistral and Pablo Neruda. Gabriela is a feminist. She's in the modernist movement, and she wrote about nature. In fact, she said, I write poetry because I can't disobey the impulse. Isn't that beautiful and poetic? She wrote about a pine forest. And of course you'd write about a pine forest in Chile, because Chile is just about, seems to me, except for the desert that many people visit up north, it just seems to be totally forested and lush and beautiful. Did you know in Patagonia, there are 11 feet of rainfall every year? 11 feet. So she wrote about the pine forest. Gabriela Mistral said, if they could, the trees would lift you and carry you from valley to valley. You would pass from arm to arm, a child running from father to father. That's nice, but Pablo Neruda is my favorite. Yes, he wrote about politics and history, and he was a good buddy with Garcia Lorca that Eileen and I talked about in Spain, in Madrid. But he's most known, at least to me, for his passionate love poems, such as 20 poemas de amor, 20 poems of love. And he also mentions the pines, but he is, quote, drunk with pines and long kisses. And he wrote about a lady that he's thinking about again. She had the voice of a bird, the heart of a house, toward which my deep longings migrated and my kisses fell happy as embers. All right, so we get out of the cerebral delights of Chile and head out by flight for an hour and 3/4 to Puerto Montt. And Puerto Montt is on the coast and with the Andes, and it's beautiful with volcanoes and black lakes and blue lakes and black mountains. And it's a wonderful district for boating and fishing and climbing and hiking and horse riding. So if you love the outdoors, you would love the Lake District of Chile. See all the lakes there. North of Puerto Montt is Puerto Varas. And Puerto Varas is just stunningly beautiful. There are 2 volcanoes there. We sat in view of these volcanoes and had poached salmon beside the churning waters and enjoyed the stunning Pacific Ocean views. And then I'm going to tell you about an island that's south of there that I didn't have the pleasure of visiting, but I have to tell you about it because my husband Dave and his buddy Bob went there to kayak, and that's Chiloé. And Chiloé, they were kayaking, but you can take a wooden boat and tour Chiloé and get out and explore. Like the town that Eileen showed us in Argentina, there's a very colorful section of Chiloé as well. It has actually 70 wooden churches, which are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And in the surrounding area, you can see dolphins and seabirds. Get out and explore. I have to show you this. This came from Dave's buddy, Bob. I don't know if you can see who's in the water, but they're a bunch of sea lions. And Bob just got the biggest kick because when they were kayaking there, he swears the biggest one was chasing Dave. For going to this area, I suggest as a previous travel agency owner that you might consider whether you want an adventure travel like I'm used to, or an escorted tour. And for maybe an adventure travel, Swoop, S-W-O-O-P, Patagonia is great because they'll just arrange suggestions and arrange for you to rent a boat or a horse, whatever you need, and help you get from place to place, but you're not escorted. But for escorted tours, Anoop said he's using Inside and Trafalgar. So there are many ways to tour Chile, southern Chile. All right, back to the map a minute. We're going to fly now from the Lake District, which is south of Santiago. We're going to go all the way down to mainland Venezuela, to mainland Chile, I'm sorry, to the town of Punta Arenas. And across from Punta Arenas is what looks like an island here, and that is Tierra del Fuego that Jane mentioned, the land of fire. Once we get to Punta Arenas, we're going to drive a little bit north to Torres del Paine. Torres meaning towers, and Paine being the local language word for blue. So these are towers of blue. Torres del Paine is one of the most beautiful places on earth. It was declared a biosphere reserve by UNESCO and the 8th wonder of the world in 2013. In Torres del Paine, we met people from all over the world, hiking or coming in tour groups. And there were lots and lots of marked trails and various types of accommodations, most of them quite rustic. We loved seeing so many animals that were tame, right, walking around with us. The guanacos, a kind of a hoofed animal that's kind of small, it's on the left. And then the rayas, the winged, short-winged birds that can't fly. And if your picture of us isn't covering it up, you can actually grab the top of the picture and move it out of the way, but if you want to, and look at these funny little guys. I wonder what those are. They're tiny little flowers that are called lady slippers. One thing that was so spectacular for me in Torres de Paine were the lakes. Each lake seemed to have a different type of sediment that gave a different colored reflection. With all the wind too, some of them there was a lot of rushing water. This is Lake Paine, which was a kind of a gray-green lake. We hiked to Salto Grande, and there we were entranced by a gray-blue lake. And we then had to start holding on to our hats as the wind pushed us while we tried to climb. I'm going to show you the wind because this is, I don't know if you can tell, but there's a strong wind blowing on Dave here on the right and Bob on the left. Bob's hair normally doesn't stick straight out and back, and he's in the wind, and Dave's hat is being blown up. I felt like the wind was so strong when we were there that I could have sat in it. It was fun wind. It wasn't scary, but it was so strong. I found a picture online that exemplifies how I felt about it. Could have practically lifted up my feet and just sailed in it. To get to Lago Grey, we had to cross over a tumultuous river by way of a suspension bridge with a 2-person maximum. And we hiked through a primeval forest. And looking through the forest, we caught a glimpse of something aqua. It was very strange. And we descended to a huge, broad, black, sandy beach. At the end of the beach, there was like a traffic jam of huge aqua blue icebergs that filled this bay. They were so close. We could have easily waded out and swum up to them if it were warm enough. The tradition down here is that you chip off some of this ages-old ice and pour it over some fine whiskey or some Chilean pisco or even your Coca-Cola. Back to the map, because we're going to go right back to Punta Arenas. And we're going to look at this section here called the Strait of Magellan. Well, for nearly 400 years, the Strait of Magellan was the route for ships traveling between the Atlantic and the Pacific. It was thought to be quicker than going clear around Cape Horn and much safer. Because that was an area that was known for its turbulence and the Drake Passage that separates Cape Horn from the Shetland Islands here in Antarctica. We had learned that the best glaciers to see were in the Strait of Magellan and in Tierra del Fuego. Again, this is Tierra del Fuego. Bob had studied the route of Magellan and who first passed through there in the 1500s, and also the famous Joshua Slocum with his ordeals on a tiny sloop. Well, knowing it was rugged, there's Bob, we did the traditional thing in Punta Arenas. There is a statue of Magellan, and what you do is you kiss his foot or touch his foot for good luck as you set out to travel through the strait, which is what we're going to do. Not on this ship. This is a ketch whose picture I found online just to show you what a ketch looks like under sail. It's not our boat, but a ketch is a 2-masted boat with the larger mast in front. This is our boat, the Foam. How did we get there? Well, Bob likes to do research, and he found this boat and talked to the owner, and the captain and rented the boat for us, along with 3 Chilean guys, to sail us through the Straits of Magellan for 5 days. I learned quickly that this was meant to be a guy's trip. Why? Well, this boat had no shower, no hot water. The head, you know, that's the nautical term for the bathroom, was reachable from my bunk down underneath by scaling a ladder, emerging into 20-degree wet air, passing across, and this is at night, of course, an ice-covered deck, and the kayaks are lashed to the deck. And there's just one line that maybe was about thigh high between me and the freezing waters of the Antarctic. And then I would have to get all the way down to the other end of the boat, to the bow, and climb down another ladder into the crew's sleeping quarters to arrive at my destination, a chemical pump toilet. But here's some of the fun things. Whales, yes. And on the bottom right, the beautiful king penguins that we're used to. And most of all, these funny little Magellanic penguins, the penguins named for Magellan. And there was another kind of seabird. I didn't take a picture of it, but they're called patos a vapor. They're paddle-wheeled ducks. Why are they strange? Well, they don't fly. They use their wings and they paddle in the water to propel themselves forward. Well, you see the telltale in the wind, and the wind picked up as we set out. And that's when I was told about a willy-wah. And I said, what's a willy-wah? It sounded to me like an Australian instrument, like a didgeridoo, but nope, wasn't that. A willy-wah, this lovely word, it's a deadly Patagonian wind, a wind gust that comes flying down the glaciers and hits the canyon and turns everything upside down, demolishes boats. That's not our boat. And drowns everyone at sea. Well, it wasn't fair that the guys waited to tell me about willy-wahs until we were in the Straits of Magellan. It's famous area for willy-wahs. In severe weather, the winds have been recorded to exceed 150 miles an hour. Well, my terror began when we left Punta Arenas and began to cross the Straits of Magellan to reach Tierra del Fuego and Agostini Sound. That was the first 8 hours. This is how the waves looked. This is how the boat, this was not our boat, but I'm showing you how the boat heels over. And remember, of course, we're passing through icebergs. And the next picture isn't one from our trip, but this is how it felt to me. The boat was flying up and down and sideways, one side and the other. And it was crashing and diving. I mean, I was terrified. And of course, the men thought it was just perfect. So I awoke the next day to footsteps on the deck and a warm sun coming down on me through the open hatch. I held my breath and I waited for the boat to fly up and down again. And instead I heard Bob say, come see. And I popped my head out to find us surrounded by breathtaking mountains. And some were snow-capped and others were covered with ferns and moss, and there were streams of water falling. We were in a cove lined with beach and with rocks, and mussels lined the sides of the cove. And this is where we would begin our first day of kayaking in Tierra del Fuego. We set out carefully, slowly hugging the shore, and actually had a beautiful paddle. While we were doing that, the crew was on the shore on the right. First, they were attaching tying the boat up with kind of a spider web of lines to the shore so that if the anchor didn't hold and the wind came up, that we'd be secured in the bay. And they erected a spit and hung some lamb on the spit and got us ready for what they said was a typical Patagonian dinner with lamb and bread and wine. The next day, Captain Agustin followed us closely as we kayaked to one glacier, and then we dinghied, got on board and dinghied to another. The melting glacier water had irrigated the shore, so there was actually little plant life. Waterfalls of melted ice carved a wide river that crashed noisily into the sea. We hear these thunderclaps, long, loud rumbles that we all assumed were thunder. Guess what? They know what they are. They're the moving glaciers. Luckily, we heard them when we were on board on the boat and not kayaking right beside them. Actually, Bob reported he heard one while kayaking back to the boat, and he had braced himself for a tidal wave to wash over him from behind, but it was fortunately only invisible shifting on a glacier. Well, this is, speaking of, let me move here. This is big fishing country, you know, Chile. On the Pacific Ocean, so many fabulous fish, king crab, conger eel on the top left, and robalo, which was their name for, and there are many different names for this and types of this Chilean sea bass that we so much treasure here in this country to have for dinner. And on the right, you see the kind of stew that the crew caught fresh robalo every day and fixed it, broiled or in a robalo stew. And so we were eating fresh caught robalo, and they cooked rice. First, they browned it in hot oil and then added the water to it to fluff it up. It made it delicious. And while we were down there, I heard a great hubbub of shouts and movement up on deck. Bob ran up, he pointed out to Agustin that we were drifting up on the beach. The wind had shifted. I was sure that they were saying something about we should man the lifeboat. And I pictured us in this frigid water and a little life raft waiting for the Chilean army to rescue us, if they ever did. The Chileans resecured the boat and came back in. They were sopping wet, even though they were wearing Patagonian brand rain gear. The rain continued through the night, and Bob told us he had to curl his body in his sleeping bag in his bunk to keep away from the dripping water that was coming in right over his bunk. He said, yeah, the deck leaked, but fortunately the hull did not. Through the next day's snow and sleet, we saw a new species of bird every hour. You know what that is? With the wings much longer than the body, that's an albatross. We saw the penguins bobbing in the waves like little black and white plastic toys. And we saw petrels with their short beaks and their bodies soaring and swimming like wind in the wind over the waves. Then I was looking up in the sky. I was entranced by a huge soaring bird with feathers that seemed to have spaces in them, like fingers. Agustin confirmed it for me, showed me in the bird book on board. Indeed, I had seen a condor. Our excursion the next day placed us at the foot of two glaciers. One was worn by the wind into kind of steps of ice, and the other was a playground of snowy blue nooks and crannies as big as the sky. This glacier was calving before our eyes, and it would send up a spray. The startling thing is that calving is not usually visible, but you hear a gunshot, it turns your head. It sounds like either a gunshot or like two big trains going full speed and colliding into each other. You'd expect the whole glacier to descend into the sea, but it very much stays put. The night before we turned to head back, and I've given you, I kept a journal, I always did, even when I had the travel agency. So I've given you a few little bits of our journal, but I really had prayed a lot because when it was so rough and it scared me. And so we were turning to go back through the Straits of Magellan again. And I just was praying for God to keep us alive. Well, it's just me, but my husband, Bob, and the Chilean crew, they thought this was great. They were beating their chests and they were masters of the sea. So they made fun of me. And then we turned around and headed back to Punta Arenas. And they all started waving their fingers at me. The sea totally calmed. Captain Augustine said he'd never seen such a calm passage through the Straits of Magellan. Oh, I was in trouble. Okay, we're back on terra firma. We head to the airport at Punta Arenas and we board our Ladeco plane. The wind is still so strong that our plane is even rocking on the ground before it even takes off. I'm like, oh, I better pray again. I just shared a bit of my journal, and I would say this trip was amazing. Dave and I would put it right up there as an adventure equal to our Trans-America bicycle trip, but that's another story. You all have been putting such great experiences into chat. I can't wait for Steve to open it up so we can hear your experiences and answer any questions you might have. Jane and Eileen and I will be here for you. Jane, you can unmute too.
Great. Okay. Well, this was fantastic and the images were great. Let's see. Madhu says, did you all get to see any penguins? Did you get to see any penguins?
Oh, yes. Oh, all over the place. Okay. And you go to down to Tierra del Fuego, or you go to Antarctica, you see penguins everywhere, especially during December, during the summer months. And then they start going and laying eggs in March and April, and don't see them as much. But when we went, we saw lots of them.
Okay, if you stop sharing your your screen, then I can visit. I can
let's
bring folks over, and here I'm just going to do it, and then everybody has the option. You don't have to share your screen. We hope you do. And this is the party part of the travel party where we all get to connect. And
we want to see.
Ileana says, no visit to Cali Carnitos or visit Malfado?
Yeah, that was Ileana. Are you there? I want to hear about that from Ileana Arroyo.
Okay. She should be coming over.
Okay. Hi, Carolyn and Brigitta and Barb and Mike and Alice and Dave. Dave's probably going to come on and say it wasn't that bad. Hi, Alice. Ileana's on now. When you unmute, Ileana, please tell us the 2 highlights that you love.
One of my favorite places was in Argentina was Calle Caminito, because it's a whole street with restaurants, and everybody's dancing tango.
Oh!
During the day, I was there for lunch, and we just sat, eating and watch people dance tango. There were people like taking pictures with the dancers, because they charge you even with your camera. And Mafalda is a comic strip very famous in Argentina. The guy who drew it is called Kino. And there are pictures, actually statues of Mafalda and all her friends throughout a section in Buenos Aires.
Oh, I know this woman, Brigitte.
And Ileana, you're a ballerina, so I'm sure you're up there dancing the tango too.
Quite, but I just want to highlight that you guys mentioned El Teatro Colón. Paloma Herrera was one of the principal ballerinas at American Ballet Theater, and she trained at Teatro Colón.
Oh.
Yeah, I think she's in charge now of their ballet.
Okay. Who else would like to chime in?
Has anyone been to Argentina or Chile?
Both.
Carolyn.
I can't.
Thank you for your nice comments, Carolyn. I think Anne had her hand up.
Yes, but I was in Santiago, and unfortunately, I could only spend one night in Buenos Aires, and then I had to go to Santiago for work. And now I'm so sorry that I missed the Lake District. I could have done that. But how much further down are the statues? You know, the statues at the, no.
In Argentina?
I thought it was in Chile, the stone statues.
In Chile? Oh, you mean the towers, the mounds of stone?
But they're, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're sort of reminiscent of Easter Island, aren't they? Yes. I didn't go there. There, you do need to fly down there. It's probably from Santiago, maybe 5-hour flight. It's a long way. And then you drive back up about an hour or maybe 2 hours, I guess, to get to the Torres del Paine. The whole thing is so worth it because flying, if you're like I am and like to look out the window, the scenery is spectacular the whole way.
So do you know if climate change has affected those areas?
Huge, you know, the driest, hottest desert, the Atacama Desert up in the north end of Chile, such a contrast with all the ice down off the southern coast. Yeah. And in the middle, it's cool, kind of like in Buenos Aires, the same thing. In the middle, it's refreshing.
Oh, it was lovely. I really enjoyed it. And the colors of the glaciers are beautiful.
The glaciers are spectacular. When we took media representatives to Argentina, many of them had traveled to a million different locations and they were sort of the hardcore journalists, but they took so many photos of the glaciers and the butterflies at Iguazu and other places. They were just really blown away. And they were really taken with Ushuaia in Tierra del Fuego. It's not a big city. I think about 40, 50,000 when I went 15 years ago or more. And it started as a prison and morphed into a city. And the cuisine is wonderful. I think there's a misconception, particularly among Americans, about food in Argentina. And you can find some of the best cuisine in the world in Argentina. And they love to show off their specialties in every region.
Well, that's nice. Well, I certainly enjoyed it. I'm sure a lot of everybody else did too.
Okay, yes, someone has asked, Madhu asked if we are sharing this recording. Steve records the programs and he creates. nice ways for us for the recordings to be accessed. So yes, it'll be available.
Earlier when we were talking, Eileen mentioned leather, and there's so many wonderful goods in Argentina. You can, I don't know that I can show this very well, but this is one of many coats. And you can buy a coat at almost any price point. And if you want to have it made the day you're there, you can do that and pick it up the next day. Shoes, belts, and wonderful silver goods. I brought another thing from my wall. If you can see this, there's so many different animals.
Oh yeah.
Crafts that look like the animals. So there's shopping is great, and you don't have to be on a big budget. You could find lots of things to buy at affordable prices.
That was Ann, honey, because it's Anita.
Evelyn, and hi, Evelyn.
Yes, hello, good to see you. Our granddaughter just popped in the door, and we hadn't seen her for about a month. And she popped in with her boyfriend, and so we ran to the door to say hello to her. And that's why we left. Both of you did a great job, and I'm so glad to see, particularly, I mean, everybody, but particularly Jane and Pat.
One of your statements surprised me. You said that in Argentina, the most popular nationality is Italian. I thought it was German.
Ooh.
In Patagonia, there's a high German presence, but overall, the Italian heritage is the predominant one.
Isn't Ted Turner the big landowner there in Patagonia?
Ted Turner?
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that if he is. I don't know.
So that's an interesting area.
There are a lot of other groups. We mentioned Chubut. There's a Welsh community there, and in the Bariloche area, the western area, a lot of Scandinavians and people with blonde hair.
A lot of
the ex-mayor of Indianapolis died on one of those cruises down there through the
Magellan?
Straits of Magellan. He was on a boat and he hit his head. And
maybe he wasn't praying, Pat.
I can't believe you did that kayaking trip through there. I mean, from the air, it just looks so desolate and dangerous.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And how many days was the trip out through the Straits?
On the water, it was 5 days. Yeah, but I would take the same amount of time in the Lake District and some more time in Santiago if you were doing a trip to Chile. And while you're there, might as well go over to Argentina.
I covet your trips. I covet your trips. I mean, everyone I've listened to, they sound really good. Neat.
Yeah, and we weren't kayaking in those waves. They would, the crew would find little bays where we could kayak.
You want to put it on? Because she's...
But still, it was so cold, you know, we had to wear, the guys had dry suits. So if you fall in, you don't even get wet. I didn't have one, so I just had a wetsuit. So I wouldn't have lasted long, but I would have had my body covered with at least a little bit of rubber.
Did you see anybody windsurfing? Because I mean, you got plenty of wind. And,
well, we didn't see anybody, period.
Too cold. Too cold for windsurfing, P.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe too brutal. Maybe too much wind. I would. Maybe on lakes would have been a little more manageable up in the lake.
Argentina is a very popular place for fishing too, if you're interested in fishing. Trout, Dorado in the north. There are a lot of, I haven't been on one, but there are a lot of tour groups that go for fishing or hunting, and frequently staying at an estancia along the way. And there are also, I discovered a sort of a network of estancias in the southern Patagonian place where you can go and see sheep and other animals.
Hey, Pat, 2 quick questions. First, what time of year did you make your trip? And 2, and the related part to that, if you had gone at a different time of year, would the weather and the chill have been as extreme?
We were there in the fall, and it was a little bit of each. We had some snow and some green. So it depends. If you want to ski, you want to go in, which is our summer, which is their winter. So you want to go then. But we were there in the mid-season.
March.
Pat, are you still leading tours? Are you still leading tours now?
Yeah, well, we will. I don't own a travel agency anymore, but we get help from our friend Anoop who joined us, and we'll put together groups of friends and like-minded travelers. Carol, we have a friend who also does that usually comes to our parties. And so, yes, I think that's in the future when we're all feeling comfortable, not just with our own, having had our vaccines, but also the people that we'll be traveling with and that we'll be visiting in the countries we go to. Bob bought a house up in Nova Scotia, kept his home in Hartford, and fortunately he did that because he can't go back and forth right now. Even though he owns a home in Nova Scotia, he can't go into Canada. So we have to look more broadly than just our own community and see if it's safe and acceptable.
I just want to add in here, the best time to go is between November and March is when it's the summertime there. And even within that time frame, January, February is considered to be the peak season. And that's when prices are a little bit higher actually because of the higher demand. So if you want to save some money, you can go in November or March. It's kind of the shoulder season when the weather is relatively good and you can get good deals also.
March is a good time for Iguazu. Also, those months that you just mentioned are good because they tend to have more rain then, and the falls go along about a 2.5 mile curve next to the border of Brazil, and it's actually made up of about 250, 275 different cascades that come down. So the more rain, the more cascades that you see.
Did you stop by the Falkland Islands?
No, but some of the trips that go to Antarctica go to the Falklands. But we didn't get that far out. I didn't want to be that far away from terra firma.
Have you been to the Northwest, to Salta? Has anybody been to Salta? I've heard that it's really fun. I've been to Tucumán, which is right next door to it. Tucumán.
Well, how many? I'm interested to see, because I love traveling to Latin America, both Central and South America. Having grown up in Costa Rica, I have a lot of comfort going to Spanish-speaking countries, but I find that more people are anxious to go to Europe than to go down to Latin America. Do you find that too, Jane?
To Europe?
More people want to go to Europe than they want to go to South America.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. Although now with more flights to the Latin countries, the first time I went to Argentina, I had to go through Miami, but now there are direct flights from DFW to a lot of the Latin areas. So if you're in the Midwest, or particularly, it's an easy route to get to Central.
Eileen, do you want to tell everyone where we're going next month? Because there may be some people that have been there as often as you, especially, but both of us have been there, and or some people may be wanting to go.
Okay. It's going to be so special. We're going to my favorite place on earth. Of all the 50 some countries I've been in, this is my idea of paradise. And we're going to Tuscany.
Yes, I heard her say that.
We'll be visiting the Tuscan hill towns, Lucca, San Gimignano, Volterra, Chianti, my very favorite Siena. We'll pop into the gateway to Tuscany with Firenze. So do come along. We're going to have quite the tour, and the scenery is going to be gorgeous.
That'd be fun.
That's their tour. I mean, this is on the travel tour next month. Yeah.
I thought she said they're going.
No, well, now. She means the travel tour. So that's next month, like about a month from now.
Yes, I can tell you the date. It's going to be on May.
Third Friday of May. Do you have your calendar there?
May 21st.
Okay.
I hope you'll come and join us for a wonderful passeggiata.
We can just take our iPads with us if we're in Charlotte, or
sure.
If we're in Charlotte,
Absolutely. Yeah. Good.
A great program.
Thank you very much.
It really is.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We loved seeing you.
Yes, it was great to see you all. And I see Madhu is there. Hello, Madhu, and Anu, friends from
Torres
and Barbara Smith, my bridge buddy. Hello, Barbara. So thank you all. And it was really fun to see Pat's presentation. I feel as though I have to go there now.
Virtually is good, Eileen. Virtually is good.
All right.
Jane, it's so good to see you.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
Bye, P. Thank you.
Good weekend.
Bye, Jane.
Eileen. Thanks, Pat.
Bye, Jane. Thank you. Bye, Alvarez.
Bye-bye.